All right, hello everyone. Sorry for the late start. I was having some technical difficulties on my end, but everything should be working well now. Please let me know if you can see and hear me clearly.
Yeah, I can hear you and see you.
Okay, great, thank you. And so let us begin today's open discussion and various topics class with the prayer. Let's open up with a prayer for spiritual workers, and then we'll move into our open discussion. Hopefully you can all see that on your screen. Some share. Now I should be able to see it. Okay. Prayer for spiritual workers. Almighty God, I bless all those who, because of their limitations, would smite me. Almighty God, I bless all those who, because of their weakness, would not heed me. Almighty God, I bless all those who, because of their ignorance, would defile you through me. And I ask, Almighty God, O wondrous power, that your strength may be given to me now, so that I might be fortified by this, so that I might go forward bravely into the world, and despite reception, send forth my love of thee throughout all races of man. Almighty God, give me the power and strength to rise above my karmic weakness, the deficiencies in the pattern of my evolution, so that I might evolve and become stronger, I, and even stronger in thy everlasting light. O God, thy will be done. Right. Share. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open Discussion and Various Topics class number 103. As per usual, feel free to ask any questions or post any comments you have in the chat, and we'll be glad to both answer and address those for you. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can use the chat. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can also ask your questions via the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature to ask your questions audibly, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. Last time, I believe maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I don't remember if we did a broadcast last week. I don't think we did. We covered a transmission entitled Coexistence. And that transmission was is included in a collection of transmissions titled Cosmic Voice, volume number 2. And let me go to the Atheist Society website really quick so you can see again where you can pick up a copy of that book. Both physical book and ebook is available from the website. One second. Cosmic Voice Volume 1, 2. Okay. I see your hand. 1 minute and I'll get to your question. Okay, so on your screen, you should see the site website shop page for the Cosmic Voice Volume 2. I would like to, and there's 2 volumes. Well, there's actually there's more than 2. I think there's 6. But volumes 1 and 2 you can also get as a physical book. And the next transmission I would like to look at, as I mentioned before, I'll announce beforehand which transmissions we'll cover to give everyone a chance to look it up and read it. So you can go to this website, ethereus.org, and on the shop, you can look for Cosmic Voice Volume 2. And in that volume, we'll look at the next one. If my thing will, let me take down the filter so you can see it. It's actually called Where Is Your Honor? It's on page 77 of volume 2. So let me bring this down so it can. All right. So this is what it looks like. Where is your honor? By next week, I will type this up so it'll be easier for us to look at and study. It's a short transmission, but there's a lot in it. So either next week or next time we have an open discussion, that is the transmission I would like to cover and have a little Q&A session on that. So again, it's in Cosmic Voice Volume 2. You can get this in physical book or ebook from the Aether Society website. And then there are several other versions as well, but I think mainly we'll just work through volumes 1 and 2. I won't go through every single, or I won't present every single transmission. Probably just select several from volume 1 and several from volume 2. We can go through it and study some of these transmissions along with the other texts that we have available to study. Okay. Let's go ahead, Jack, if you have a question. Welcome.
Okay, yes. I was thinking today about how Dr. King said, I think it was in Man's Mind lecture or in one of those things about the pen having more consciousness, me having more consciousness than the pen, because I have lodged a bit of consciousness in my brain, so it's about the way the consciousness accumulates. It's quite a rambling question, so I'll get there. In the end, it's so the way the consciousness accumulates, and I was wondering about the difference between like prana and mind, because if consciousness is mind, because we do all these practices with prana, we try and accumulate prana through mantra and pranayama. But do we accumulate consciousness in the same way? Is that how we're going through evolution? Because as you know, in like the 8th freedom, when it's eternal existence, when you merge with someone else, but you know, as through each stage of my evolution, is a master more evolved because they have a greater accumulation of consciousness in their being. And I was thinking about how we accumulate conscious through the sense organs, like through the eyes and your reading and taking in information and ears, you know, the sound, and the consciousness and intelligence are both mind. And I was wondering how, if prana and mind are fundamentally, are they the same thing, like light and sound are part of the one thing? Is the one energy, because in the one consciousness, are they ultimately the same? If that makes any sense to anyone. The difference between prana and consciousness, and are we accumulating consciousness? You've probably said this in many times, I just kind of haven't quite grasped it, haven't lodged enough consciousness in there. So I kind of need it restating again.
How you doing, Jack?
Great, thank you.
The prana is a product of mind and consciousness. Prana, when prana is circulating through the body, we call it psychic energy. Of course, psychic refers back to mind. So, because psychic describes the attributes of mind or consciousness. So you have the reason why we manipulate prana is because what we want to do, we want to create a greater capacity of mind and consciousness. Now, consciousness is limited from mind. Mind is really unmeasurable unless it's trapped into a field of auric field of consciousness. So, but what prana does, if you look back at the, like I always tell people to stick with the mystic constitution of man, because you can always go back and reference it to have it make sense. It's like a multiplication chart. You know, you can always find the answer with the multiplication chart. Well, with the mystic constitution of man, you can always find the answer. Prana, when prana enters the body, it enters the body in it's three types of prana. There's a positive flow of prana, a negative flow of prana, and a neutral flow of prana, which is the negative and the positive traveling in the same direction. So when these three intersect, you have what's called consciousness. You have a field of consciousness that the soul
Anybody can you hear me?
Oh, I understood that from the diagram where every chakra, the Idam Pingala intersect, yeah, and each chakra is a realm of consciousness. So where they intersect from the diagram, yeah.
Nehemiah, are you there? It sounded like you went out for a second. Oh, yeah, we just lost them.
So Dwayne, is the difference between consciousness and mind is consciousness is mind slowed down? Is that right? Is that what I understood?
As I understood it, mind and consciousness are two different things. Mind is what molds and shapes prana, energy.
Okay.
Let's wait for Nehemiah to come back so we can answer that thoroughly for you.
I would say consciousness is mind personified. It could be personified in a person. It could be personified in an animal or any living thing, or it could be personified in the example you gave earlier with the pen that you're holding. So mind is all pervasive, and then once it's embodied, it becomes consciousness. And that embodiedness we loosely can term as personified. And so when I use the word person, I'm not just limiting it to a human being, I'm just using it to a definite expression, a specific expression. So a whale, a donkey, a pen, a furniture, a person, the sun, the galaxy, those are personifications of the all-pervasive energy of mind.
So are we all slowing down the mind to make, like, do I make this pen because I could slow down prana and mind enough? Is that a way to explain it? Or?
Correct. Yes, it is. At some point, the all pervasive fact of it, when you think of something as all pervasive, it's infinite in nature. So it's a quote unquote blank slate. Now, how does it take form? How does it take shape? And then that is what gives rise to form, is the eventual slowing down of that. And that is, in essence, the definition of consciousness. It's the slowing down of that energy to a point where you have a definite expression of will.
And so what's the difference between intelligence and consciousness then? Is it the same one and the same?
I think it's the most important thing when it comes to that type of vocabulary is how you view like your specific understanding of intelligence. For me, consciousness is above intelligence. You know, so intelligence is, you can say it's a degree of how we measure consciousness. So the intelligence of the pen versus the desk, the chair, or the computer versus the animal, the dog, the human being, those are all different expressions of consciousness, where in that example, the human being contains the highest form of intelligence. But then when you start moving beyond us and you're talking about, say, adepts and avatars and planetary bodies, then the intelligence of those logos or of that mind substance / consciousness is far greater. So I would say intelligence represents sometimes the degree of organization, and the I guess you can say the degree to which the will is able to express itself will determine the level of what we call intelligence. So the greater the power of the will, its ability to exert itself over the raw substance, then I would say the more intelligent that expression is.
So is that means the greater duration of its allotted time in existence is because of because where does prana come into this? Because prana is there's only two things, mind and prana, or is there other things?
Well, prana is a subset of mind. It's mind differentiated. So as you take the one substance, the one absolute, and begin to embody itself or manifest itself, then when you get to mind, the mind eventually begins to, at some point, you have to quote unquote, break it up. But it's ultimately the sheath in which prana moves in, which we call lines of force. But it's part of the manifestation process of the absolute, which I think was really broken down really nicely in the 7 dimensions of creation. If you think about the 7 dimensions of the creation, once you get to mind, then once you're beyond mind, you get into a physical reality. Nehemiah, you back?
Yeah, I'm here. My main computer went down. I got electrician in my house, and my Wi-Fi went out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I missed the question, but did Jack? Did you understand my previous question? My previous answer?
Yeah, it did. I just still wondered about. So we're accumulating consciousness, so that because the pen, then me, then the master. So when we do our practices and when we do our reading, because we say we're raising our consciousness, but are we accumulating our consciousness? When if I stare at a book, if the picture in the Day the Gods Came, for example, am I drawing greater, because I'm not really taking in prana, am I? I mean, but I'm taking in consciousness, and because if the difference between me and the pen is I need to lodge more consciousness, so I need to can I measure it in, like, if I'm in a computer game, one of those where I'm going searching for ingots, and I get these points. So if I spend the morning in nature and then I go do the 12 blessings and I get another 2 and then another 2 ingots there, and then I do, and then I spend time in the company of a great master, and then on my rate. So do I have 16 units of extra consciousness in that day? Like, am I accumulating consciousness in the way that I'm doing with the pranayama? Like, because like Pac-Man, no? Pac-Man, that we're going through, and you bring the globules of prana to you, and you accumulate. Is it separate or the same with consciousness and
Well,
mind?
everything is consciousness. Your existence here is based in consciousness. When you move beyond consciousness, you go into the realms of the soul and the spirit. But everything in the manifestation of the soul is consciousness, because the soul creates consciousness in order to operate through various experience cycles. So as I taught everyone in the past, that every action you make becomes a samskara within the aura. And that samskara is nothing but bits and pieces of intelligence and power. Remember, all intelligence is power, because when you learn about something, you gain control over that. That exhibits itself as an ability and power. So as we move through our experience cycles, what we do, we accumulate the capacity to assimilate certain information and make a greater capacity to work in a field of consciousness. In other words, so the difference between an ordinary man and a psychic man is that the psychic man can see 1 or 2 realms more than what the ordinary man can see. The psychic man can examine things on multiple realms of existence, and the ordinary man, if he examined things on multiple realms of existence, he do it in an unconscious state, because he limit himself to a physical state. Now, as he moves forward, he'll realize, as the scientists have did, that there's multiple realms of physical state. And then if he educate himself there, he's becoming closer and closer to the psychic world. But the psychic man, he moves further than that, and he projects his consciousness to an astral or subtle realms and examine things there, and then come back and examine it in the physical world. And he can see the energy that's feeding the physical world. Now, the difference between a master or an adept and the psychic man and the ordinary man is that the master can exist on hundreds of realms of existence and see how things operate on 100 realms of existence. And we may say, oh, that's kind of, but we do it here on the physical realm. When you put a machine together, you calculate multiple degrees of movement, of velocity, of the velocity of each piece, the integrity of that, the lifespan of it. You measure all these different realms of activity, which is realms of consciousness, because the only thing that makes things move is mind and consciousness. Without mind and consciousness, nothing moves. But we do it on the physical plane in order to give life to so-called inanimate objects, such as metal, plastic, wire, whatever. Mechanical mechanisms work with mind. What is the mind? The mind of the designer. And then and that designer put everything together in order to make it move. It's the same thing happening inside our bodies. So the designer is the soul. And the soul place everything together in order to determine what capacity you're going to work for in this cycle of life.
So if we're so there's these 5 pranas coming from the sun every 32 minutes, and that's the energy we have to work with. Yeah, that's the energy that's been put at a level frequency that we can use. So we're in a sea of mind. Mind is everywhere. So are we accumulating this mind into our consciousness through like Jnana yoga, wisdom, and through reading, or through another one of the yogas? Does that make sense? I know I'm doing a bad job with the wisdom part.
Hold on. My power came back on. So
this is an example of you being in 2 places at once.
Yeah. So what happened is not that you are accumulating mind, because mind flows through you. It's not that you're accumulating mind. Is that you're able to work with mind at a greater capacity. That's the big difference.
I'm not accumulating consciousness and mind.
No, your mind. In other words, if you can imagine 10 years ago, a television screen. Well, let's say 20 years ago, a television screen was very fuzzy.
Yeah.
And you can only get a few channels. Now you have a greater capacity and a greater resolution within the television screen. So you can see more. You can see more detail. Even the cameras. Before, in order to have a good resolution camera, we had to have this huge machine that filtered light and came in and picked up all these pixels and whatever. But now a simple telephone can pick up as much resolution as those giant television machines before. It's using a greater capacity and less space. Now, the yogis talked about this hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. They said that as the adept grows, his aura expands. And then when he ascends, his aura shrinks. But yet he has a greater capacity. Why? Because now he can split his consciousness up into multiple parts. He can move through all the realms of existence without dying and going through reincarnation. He can leave the earth and travel throughout the stars. Because why? Because he have pulled all the auric energy that was really polluting the great Mother Earth. To a certain extent, he had pulled it into himself, and now he's controlling every ounce of that auric substance, and that's what makes him or her an ascendant being.
So it's not that he has more prana; he has more consciousness.
Well, he can manipulate the prana to any level of consciousness he would want to. And that's the difference.
Okay. Okay. I think I'm a few steps closer.
It's not about more consciousness, because consciousness is limited. If you look at the yogas that the masters gave us to study, the 12 yogas, if you look at them, you would notice that that all the yogas build up to a dissolution of consciousness. You probably have the first 10 yogas condition the body in order to allow a flow of Kundalini to flow through the body. And then when you get to that's Tantra, when you get to Tantra, they use all the yogas in order to move the Kundalini. And then the Kundalini moves through the body. But the last yoga that they describe to us is Laya Yoga, which is a dissolution of consciousness. Because why? Because consciousness limits our ability. It limits us to be localized in one place. So once we get to an ascendant point, we pull in the auric body, and the auric body, from what they tell us, is indestructible. And we use that indestructible energy in order to move forward and build a greater and greater and greater capacity. You know, I think the 9 freedoms go into that deeply as they go into solar existence, Saturnarian existence, and I mean interplanetary existence, Saturnarian existence, and then solar existence. And it really explains how, you know, how once they get into this cosmic level, this cosmic being level, ascendant being level, they can manipulate consciousness and move anywhere they want to, and live anywhere they want to, and live in multiple bodies of existence. So, and that's because they have full control over these pranas within the body. Therefore, they can manipulate consciousness the way they want to. Because remember what I told you, it's the Ida and the Pingala coming together, intersecting many times, and that's what builds the conscious. That's what allow us to work. That's how the chakras form within the body, which is consciousness, which is realms of existence. Now, once you have complete control over the flow of that energy, you could build any state of consciousness you want to and move into any state of consciousness you want to.
That makes real sense. Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm. Okay, do you have any other questions? Comments? We still have a couple of handouts left from the last discussion on withdrawing of the senses and the chakra system to cover. So as we go through these last, let me see, 5 pages, shouldn't be that long. Let's you can feel free to ask any questions or any comments you have, and we'll still answer them. So if you remember in previous open discussions, we were looking at the withdrawal of the senses and looking at the 10 psychic senses, or the 10 senses, including the 5 that we're most familiar with and the 5 additional senses that are revealed in the yogic teachings. We then also looked at the physical, astral, and etheric counterpart of those senses. And then we also looked at the processes of withdrawing. We mapped out and with the 10 senses as corresponding to the aura, and also talked about how to, with the withdrawal of those senses, pulling those senses in as part of our spiritual practice. So finally, we'll look at the chakra system. Now, this diagram, you've seen this illustration before. We have these ovoid lines representing the different layers of the aura, and then we have these circles going down the center of the body, representing the chakras. But also notice here on the right-hand side, you hear us talk quite a bit about the realms. So you'll see Nimai has depicted the higher etheric, astral, lower astral, and the basic realms as they correspond to the chakras or levels of consciousness in which the individual entity is operating upon. Generally speaking, the higher etheric realms or the heavens generally operate from the heart center and upward. And you have the 3 basic or general astral realms, which are from the solar plexus to the base of the spine, and that's where the bulk of humanity dwells. And then you have the 7 lower astral realms, or referred to as the hells. Well, actually, the astral realms include the 3 basic realms as well. When it says 7 lower astral realms here, then in the legs, that would be the chakras or centers for the animal kingdom, but they're not depicted in this diagram. There's other diagrams where Nimai does depict them, but generally, we in our study, in our practice, focus on the 7 major centers from the base of the spine upward. And so in most depictions, you'll see those 7 major centers illustrated. Let's move on to a brief description of the chakra system. I'll read the paragraph first and then come back up to the table. As the main components of the chakra system are a series of sound vibrations of different frequencies. Okay, Va, I see your question, and I'll pose your question after I finish reading this paragraph. These sound vibrations are said to originate from the soul in its effort to involve parts of its consciousness in order to bring about a limited state of consciousness. The soul projects a perpetual sound vibration, a spoken word, that set in motion a series of modifications on the universal mind substance and cosmic energies that formulates various vehicles which it works through on several realms of existence to gain its karmic experiences on the physical mental realms, the astral mental realms, and the etheric mental realms. All right, so if you remember back to chapters 8 and 9 in the ancient language of the soul text, it was ancient chapter, chakra system part 1 and part 2. Nehemiah went into great detail describing the chakra system, and this table can also be found in that text as well. So if you want a lot more detailed information, discussion on the chakra system, I will recommend you go back to the Ancient Language of the Soul text or go back to the study session series where I actually read out the entire book and we go over, I think in following open discussions, we went over the chapters in a bit more detail, looked at some highlights and asked some questions, posed some questions to the author, just in mind, so that he answered several of those questions and addressed more comments in those texts. So I will invite you to go back and look back at the Ancient Language of the Soul to get more in-depth information about the chakra system, as well as in several lectures given by Dr. George King on the chakras, the nadis, psychic development, and others. So you can look back at those lectures, including previous lectures Nehemiah has given on the same subjects as well. This perpetual sound vibration that resonates from the soul represents the consciousness of the soul within the subtle and gross bodies that's built from the mind and pranic energies. The soul develops a series of vortex centers of concentrated sound frequencies, chakras, that extends out, creating a network of sound consciousness that acts as a matrix of sound, which has a magnetic pull and modification power over the universal mind substance and cosmic energies that it uses in order to express its consciousness through. This is the Sabda body, sound body, that stands behind all living things. That is the consciousness of all living things. Within this Sabda body, there are chakras, bindus, bijas, the chakra petals, the nadic system, and the kundalini. This is the core consciousness of any being here on our Mother Earth. And there was a handout specific to the Sabda bodies. Okay, we looked at it before, but I do want to go over it again because it is mentioned here. Before I do that, I have a couple of questions here in the chat, so let's address those questions. It says, hello, I've tried to surround myself with pink light, and it was way harder than blue light. The blue light comes easy. What does that mean? And perhaps natural to me, is blue good for protection too?
What type of practice, which, because, you know, what does she mean by pink? He or she, what do they mean by pink? Are they talking about the violet color flame? Or what? What practice are they using in order to try to do that? To answer a question, I might be personal to someone. It might be the reason why they're having problems with that. It might be something in their subconscious mind. It might be their reaction. Their reaction could be subconscious. If you want to guide your mind to do what you tell it to do, then we're taught in the past to go by a pink light or violet colored light or green, whatever, and light the room up that color, and then aid your mind into imagining and visualize what you want it to do, because you are the controller, the commander of your mind, and you have to aid your mind into something. You don't know what type of subconscious or psychological condition you have brought on yourself from past experiences that's stopping you from doing a particular thing. But I'll be interested to know, are you talking about the pink flame? Because the pink flame doesn't come up all the way around the body. that we use is used in a particular pinpoint position. If you're talking about the violet color flame, it should be violet, not pink. So if you want to share that with me, let me know. I hope that answers your question.
And the next question is, why are there 7 chakras below the root chakra, but Dr. King says there are only 4 realms below?
I don't know if Dr. King's ever saying that. So, and if he did say something like that, it was a reason. You have to know the reason why he said that. But I don't know. The ancient teachings tell us there's 7 below and 7 above. In fact, even that's not completely accurate, because as I showed you, going deep into the ancient teachings, we can account for at least 360 realms of existence here on Earth. Now, of course, there's 7 major chakras above and 7 major chakras, or 7 major realms, because chakra actually mean realms. There's 7 realms, major realms above, and 7 major realms below, that actually represent either physical, astral, and etheric realms. So I don't know if Dr. King ever saying that. And I listened to his teachings and audio tapes since I was a child. And if he did mention something like that, he may have mentioned that they shut down 3 realms in order to do a mission or cut off access to them or whatever. But no, I don't remember him mentioning. Do you remember him mentioning something like that, Dwayne?
The closest thing I could think of, and I had to be careful of that too, and I had to ask Nehemiah about it, is sometimes when Dr. King is talking about a mission, or he's talking about the masters or whatever, he'll say things like, oh, I popped up to level 3, up to level 4, down to level 1, up to level 3. And it can get confusing if you don't understand how he's using those terms. So I remember so many times I had to ask Nehemiah to explain that to me. So Jack, be careful when you're listening to Dr. King, particularly like talking about like Carmelite or the alien mission. He'll say that, a lot. The adepts, they jumped up to level 4, down to level 1, up to level 3, and it as I understood, does not always correspond to the chakra. He is talking about a realms of existence or plane of existence. They're jumping between the realms, or moving between the realms. Or like, for example, when I think it was Operation Prayer Power was performed on level 5, like that. He'll talk about that a lot, but it doesn't always refer back to how we say, for example, here the chakras laid out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He doesn't always, when he's referring to a jumping between the realms, doesn't always refer back to the chakras as we understand them here depicted in this diagram.
And another thing is, remember too, and I caution students of Dr. King many times that because of his experience and moving through the realms of existence, and one time he told us he'd been to all the realms, he can make certain statements that we can't make, and he see things and know things that we can't, that he can't even begin to tell us for security reasons. But he also stated to us that he didn't think the ancient teachings or the yogi teachings can be improved upon. So you have to take that into account, because he learned the teachings from yogis, and of course he do believe, and he did speak at one time about 7 realms and 7, the 7 major realms and all of that. He explained that to us. But as time went on, he created his own definition in order to teach the public the things that, and in order to convey this knowledge to the public, because It was very hard to convey the knowledge using Sanskrit terminology, especially if that wasn't his goal to be a teacher. His goal was to do missions and teach what he can teach so that you can understand. But it's actually our goal to go out and assimilate the information that he gave to the world, that he revealed to the world. Okay, that's it.
Are there any additional questions?
Yeah.
Superconscious. Okay.
The projection, the protection is a violet colored flame. You want to use a violet colored flame for protection. And that comes from the Mother Earth. There's a practice that that's given in the practice of Aetherius. I think I did some diagrams on it. It might be inside the folder that we created. Is it in there?
On the Google Drive share folder, probably not. I have to go back and check.
I know we shared it before.
Yeah, we did. You shared it before. I don't think it's in there.
But you can email me for it, and I give you those. I can send you those diagrams.
Actually, yes. So in the 2020 folder, there is a PDF entitled Practice of the Presence and Violet Flame Practice -diagram. So in there, the violet flame vision practice and the practice of the presence is explained and illustrated. So you can take a look at that. I think the only one that is not in there is the pink flame practice. But if you email us, we can give you additional information about that, or you can also get that from the Aetherius Society, because those practices were given to us by the Master Aetherius, I believe. Is there any more questions? Let me go back to the diagram. I did want to come back again and look at the Sabda bodies and the 4 states of sound. So we looked at this before, so I'm going to skip the first page, and let's just go straight to the 4 aspects of creation to give us a bit more background information on the Sabda bodies, which we referred to in the last page in that last set of diagrams in the 7 chakras diagram. Four aspects of creation. Every intelligence exists as a twin soul. Let me go back to the beginning. In the late 1950s, Dr. George King, a Western yogi master, had a physical contact with a cosmic being reportedly from the planet Mars, with the code name Mars Sector 8. Keep that name in mind, Mars Sector 8, because next time when we look at the transmission, Where Is Your Honor? That transmission was given to us by being operating under the code name Mars Sector 8. Now, I don't know if it's the same being, but it is the same code name. Well, more on that next time we cover that transmission. This avatar laid out in simple terms the average state of consciousness of an individual living on Mars one of the planets of our solar system with advanced interplanetary existence. All right, so earlier, Nehemiah, I'm going to keep interjecting like this, so I apologize, guys. Earlier, Nehemiah talked about the 9 freedoms, referencing the 9 freedoms, as well as the Bernard. So if you go back to the 9 freedoms text and the lectures, one of the freedoms is interplanetary existence. And this being Mars sector 8 is an example of being in an interplanetary existence. He explained that they live on the highest planes of existence, which is the etheric realms of their planets. So we looked at earlier, remember the chakra diagram, and we looked at from the heart center upwards and beyond is the higher etheric realms. On our planet, on Earth, those higher realms are sparsely populated, but on other planets like Mars, once you go through the ascension, which is one of the freedoms, you ascend beyond the Earth levels of conscious operation, and you go into the higher planes of existence, i.e., as on the planet Mars, and you're able to enter interplanetary existence. So when we look at, Nehemiah told us this before in a previous lecture about the 9 freedoms. So the reason that when we look at Mars, the planet, from our level of conscious operation, the planet appears desolate and barren and lifeless. And that is because all the beings of Mars exist on the higher etheric realms. They vacated their gross physical realms, the realms that we exist on. The beings of Mars and other planets throughout our solar system, not even discussing beyond our solar system, but within our solar system, those beings all exist on the higher etheric realms, and they left their gross physical realms, ones that we dwell upon, vacant and abandoned because they have no need for those realms. Every intelligence exists as a twin soul, one with a primary positive male configured consciousness and another with a negative female configured consciousness, all called by the avatar, the Mars sector 8, as aspect number 1, the twin soul. Now, this first aspect creates a second aspect to move through the subtle realms of the prospective planet, gaining experience and to perform a particular job. Now, if the avatar's intelligences wants to travel outside the planet, a third aspect is created to make the interstellar journey. Then when the avatar's intelligence has a mission to help a lower race of people on another planet, a fourth aspect is created to be incarnated into their life cycle for a duration of time. Nehemiah has a lecture on, which goes into much more detail, actually a series of several lectures, not just one lecture, several lectures that goes into more detail about the aspects. I see you can go back and look through our playlist and find more information about that. And Dr. George King has a lecture specifically dealing on the 4 aspects, where he both goes into this, I don't think it was a transmission, I think it was, what's that other type of communication called? It's not a transmission. I think he actually met, I don't know, where he goes into this
mental.
Yes, the mental transmission. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
He goes into this. He in the cosmic voice is the actual one of the cosmic voices is the actual mental transmission, and then he goes into detail about it in a lecture called the four aspects of creation. So I invite you to go back to it, listen to that. Oh, there you go. More information on this subject can be found in the side lectures audio series by Dr. Screen called The 4 Aspects of Creation. and an article that records the whole event of contact with Mars 68 on the Covenant England, written in the Cosmic Voice. Okay, so there you go. So you can go to the website and get more information about that. So remember, again, we're looking at this so we can get a better understanding of the Sabda bodies, which we talked about in the 7 chakras and Sushumna diagram, which we're going to go back to after I finish reading this and look at the illustration in the middle. So 4 states of sound within the ancient teachings, the yoga, there is the science of sound, or mantra sastra, which sheds some light on the formation of man's consciousness and its levels of operations. A study of this ancient science will help the student to begin to understand the teachings of the 4 aspects of creation delivered to the world by Dr. George King after his physical contact with Mars Sector 8. The Earth man's consciousness on the physical and subtle planes of existence requires a manifestation of 4 distinct states of sound from the soul's vehicle of consciousness known as Kundalini. The soul of man, at the express will of the spirit, pushes the Shakti power, now Sushumna, into a 3.5 knot called Kundalini. So we'll look at that next. We'll come back to this diagram and we'll look at Sushumna Gnotic flow, which in this diagram, Nehemiah illustrates what's being described in this paragraph. So we'll keep that in mind as we'll go back to the paragraph of the diagram. The soul of man at the express will of the spirit pushes the Shakti power, Sushumna, into a 3.5 knot called Kundalini, which reveals its essence, Shiva, by moving into a dormant state and releasing a creative, holy sound that manifests itself with 4 distinct sounds that produces 1, various states of consciousness. 2, pranic positions, and 3, levels of operation. The 4 states of sound are known as, all right, so, and I'll also, as I'm reading this, look at the illustration and you'll see how they correspond. Pada sound at the base, 1. This is the supreme sound as pure potentiality in the divine will of the Absolute, arising from the union of Shiva and Shakti. And then 2, Pasyanti sound, illustrated as pointing to the solar plexus center. This is visible sound of the mental images prior to thought. This is the sound that arises from the subtle level of sound. It graduates from the first state of sound into the power of consciousness that forms the mental images prior to thought. 3, Madhyama sound, and we're pointing to the heart center. This is the intermediate level of sound as manifested thought. It is this level where the visible sound, Pasyanti, graduates to manifested thought forms with continuous motion. It is here where this level of sound builds motion before it solidifies into gross audible sound. And then we have Vaikhari sound, which is pointing, 4, which is pointing to the throat center. This is manifested sound as gross, coarse, audible sound. This is the final step in the 4 levels of graduated sound. It is a solidification of sound in gross intelligent form. At this level, consciousness exists on several realms of existence: the casual or supra-conscious realm, the etheric realms, the mental realms, the astral realms, and physical realm. Okay. So before I jump back to the 7 chakras diagram to see, are there any questions, comments?
Yeah,
Or did you? Yes.
one thing needed to say on the four states of sound, you can find that information in the Serpent Power book by Sir Arthur Avalon, and also in the Swami Sivananda book on Kundalini Yoga. And both of them were very advanced yogis. In fact, Swami Sivananda was reported to be a bodhisattva. He was a cosmic being. But at the beginning of his book, that's the first thing he described when he described man, and he described the 4 states of sound. And it makes sense when you go back to what Dr. George King was talking about, that we are 4 aspect beings. With, you know, and in order to operate on this earth, the cosmic beings have to reduce themselves to a 4th aspect of themselves.
And to follow up what Nima just said, when cosmic beings in order to work on this earth, they have to come in a 4th aspect. Let's say a really powerful and striking example or illustration of the implications of that is given in Dr. George King's lectures, the men who won Operation Carmelite for you. It's a bit of a long lecture, but it's a very powerful lecture. I'd highly recommend any students of Dr. George King to listen to that lecture. Okay. Any questions? So now let's take a look at the Sushumna Nadic flow. And so in the illustration on the left-hand side, you see depicted traveling up the center of the body, the Sushumna Nadi. And within the Sushumna Nadi is the Vajra Nadi and the Tritra Nadi and the Brahma Nadi. And in the description on the right-hand side, I'll go into detail about those nadis. So let's start off with this Sushumna Nadic flow of energy carries a Shakti quality of the preservational forces of all cosmic energies. The Sushumna Nadic line of force holds consciousness and manifestation on several planes, lokas, of existence, and allows man to gain countless lifetimes of valuable experience. It is said that the Sushumna Nadi has 3 inner channels that seem to compress all the qualities of Shakti force and of Shakti force of the Nadic and chakra system into one minute channel that pushes upwards and forward, opening the major chakras and giving tremendous power over the cosmic energies and mind energies, placing man's conscious awareness on a supra-conscious level. The first layer of the Nadic vibrations, let me zoom in, within the Sushumna Nadi is called the Vajra Nadi. So if you look on the illustration here, you'll see these dotted lines moving in towards the center, and each dotted line represents a layer of the Sushumna Nadi. The first layer of the nadic vibrations within the Sushumna nadi is called the Vajra nadi, a conduit inside the central channel that extends from the genital region to the head region. The Vajra is described as a hard substance like diamonds, hard but lustrous, with the light and power of thunderbolts. It is said that this layer of Sushumna nadis, the Vajra nadi, is the place where the sexual energy ojas connects with the brain. Ojas is the highest form of base physical manifested energy in the human body, which is a concentrated form of semen. And so Nima, I have a question. The Vajra nadi, is this, when we're doing the standing on the head practice, this is we're trying to get ojas to flow up the Vajra nadi, up to the brain, up to the head?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Because of it originated from the head.
Right. Okay. So next we'll look at the second inner layer of the Sushumna nadi, which is called the Tritra. I hope I'm saying that right. Tritra nadi. The configuration of this Tritra nadic force is of a sattvic quality, a pure Shakti force of fire, Agni, sun, Surya, and moon, Chandra, at its highest level of equilibrium throughout every level of its channel. These three energy configurations are known as the three aspects of Sabda Brahman. Within the Tritra Nadi is the Brahma Nadi, where the pure cosmic energy of evolution flows as the power of Kundalini. It is the Kundalini power that travels through the Brahma Nadi, where all major chakras reside. As the Kundalini power passes through this channel, it opens each chakra that resides along this inner path of the Sushumna Brahma Nadi that brings man from a limited conscious state to an expanded conscious state. And so earlier we talked about, we're looking at the Sapta bodies illustration, how the energy is pushed down to Sushumna and wrapped in a 3.5 knot configuration. And so here in the center here, we have the illustration of this nadi knot, and how, and then it also included is illustration of how the nadis, the layers of the Sushumna nadi connect to this Kundalini knot. And then this illustrates here, these are the petals of the base of the spine, the Muladhara chakra. So you have the serpent, and we can zoom in a bit more, it's easier to see. Illustrated here is a serpent wrapped around this kind of downward shaping oval that represents the Kundalini. And then you have the Sushumna Nadi, and then within it, the Vajra Nadi, another layer, Chitra Nadi, another layer, the Brahma Nadi. Are there any questions or comments? And so in this page, we look again at the chakra system, but this time includes the direction of Kundalini consciousness and includes the levels of mind corresponding to the various chakras. We'll move from the base upwards. At the base of the spine chakra, you have the super conscious mind and the subconscious mind. At the sex chakra, at the subconscious and the conscious mind. Basically, it's showing the levels of mind that predominantly operate, if I remember correctly, at the different levels of, or the different chakra levels of consciousness. At the solar plexus chakra, the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, and then very little in small text of the superconscious mind. But as we move up, you'll see that the super and supraconscious minds take on higher and higher, or greater and greater levels of operation. At the heart center, again, you have the conscious and subconscious mind, and very little operation of the superconscious mind. But then as we move to the throat chakra, you have a greater operation of the superconscious mind, and then greater still at the Christ chakra. But then at the crown chakra, you have the supra conscious mind. I forgot what these red lines illustrate, Nehemiah.
They represent the flow of Kundalini in the front of the body and the impurity traits too. So, and to talk more about what Jack was asking about earlier, on several different cases, when the Cosmic Masters gave transmissions to Dr. George King, and even in the ancient teachings, they talk about the lower hells being highly populated. Now, one of the reasons for the lower hells being highly populated by mankind is because of these impurity traits we were talking about last week. And it is these impurity traits that open up those lower realms. Now, just as it is, I believe, just as it is on the higher realms, there's very small populations. On the very, very deep lower realms, there's very the population is not that great, but majority of the lower realms, the population is far greater, super exceeds the population of the higher realms. So the lower you get, because of the direction of mankind moving forward, there's very, very few people on the very, very low realms. That's where the great black musicians spun their wells. That's where the alien mission talk about with even the Carmelite. But the rims, the middle lower rims are the largest population, because you have to have a lot of power in order to be on the very, very low rims. And if you heard Dr. King say that, that's what he was probably referring to, if you understand what I'm talking about. Now, in my illustration of the seven realms, I give examples of mind, of the state of mind in order to live on those realms. If you pay close attention to that, it's almost animalistic in a sense. So, but that's is that, those are things to think about. That as we curb our mindset and begin to live in a more bhakti yoga type existence, then we will eliminate the lower realms. Go ahead.
Okay. So there's a question or comment here. I've had a Kundalini awakening, and being in the sun is a drain at times. If I go out at night, it's super peaceful. I don't fully understand that. And they go on to say, when I say Kundalini awakening, I mean all day, every day, I feel Kundalini. It only goes away if I overeat, then it returns.
Okay, let me explain Kundalini. In order for you to blink your eye, you use the power of Kundalini. In order for you to wiggle your finger, you use the power of Kundalini. Kundalini is constantly being used with us. I understand Kundalini in that. When I would say Kundalini awakening, I would say that you moved because the power of Kundalini give us life, but we only use maybe 1-2% of that power of Kundalini. Some people may use 3%. But Kundalini awakening is when you move using 15, 20, 30, 40% of that Kundalini, and you pull it up through the body. And usually at that time you become your body become very restrictive, your mind becomes sharp, and you're doing that in order to carry out a particular task. Now, when you put the Kundalini down again, your capacity to use energy should be a little bit greater. So people have to understand that it is, they use these words loosely. And if you raise the power of Kundalini fully, then you become paralyzed. Your physical body become paralyzed because you move into an ultra supermind state of existence. So you drain all the power of Kundalini out of the body and you push it into Shushumna, and you have an awakening. That's the true awakening of Kundalini. The weekend Kundalini Rise classes that they give is not real, in my opinion. According to the ancient teaching, it's not real. So that's that. You can have partial Kundalini awakening, and you can have what's called a shift, an energetic shift in the body, where you gain a greater access of energy, which may affect your sensory perception. And that's the existing Kundalini in the body. That's not you waking up Kundalini. And that may cause certain sensory perception type activity. And I think that's what you're probably describing. And once you gain control over that greater capacity, that subside. I hope that answers your question.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, so we'll finish up this 7 chakras in the Schumann diagram by looking at the levels of development through states of consciousness. Nimai has several lectures on Raja Yoga, as well as lectures on concentration, contemplation, meditation. And Dr. George King has a lecture series on the same topics, many lectures on meditation, but it's a specific lecture recording titled Concentration, Contemplation, Meditation, where he talks in great detail about the 3 states and moving through those states and what they mean. He goes into great lengths to actually define meditation. I don't know in that lecture if he gives practices, but in the Mystic Practices series, and which is unfortunately not available, Nimai does give several practices on how to develop your concentration and contemplation in the contact your higher self through yoga, those pranayama practices, as well as realizing the potential, gives also additional practices for developing your concentration. So listed here are 5 levels. And as you move up, generally speaking, as you move up in level of conscious operation, you can develop greater and greater operation, be it as concentration. Then level 2 comes contemplation, level 3 meditation, level 4 samadhi, and level 5 cosmic consciousness, which is one of the freedoms. So if you look at this diagram here on the bottom left-hand corner, you have the different levels, levels 1 through 5, concentration through cosmic consciousness. And then on the left-hand side, you have laid out the psychic centers or the chakras. And as you, I believe these blue squares represent levels of activity. So as you develop and move through these 5 levels, you are moving higher and higher and higher up the chakra system, shifting the consciousness higher and higher up the chakra system. And so at the base of the spine and the sex chakra, when we begin concentrating, developing our concentration, we are mostly operating at those 2 centers, with less and less operation at the solar plexus and heart chakra. And then as we master concentration and move into contemplation, we move higher up. The level of activity shifts from the base and from the sex, with some operation in the sex, but more so in the solar plexus, heart, and beginning operation in the throat center. At level 3, true meditation, we depart almost entirely the lower or the basic realms, base of the spine, sex center. We're no longer operating at those centers, very little or leaving the solar plexus center and moving into greater operation in the heart, throat, as well as the Christ center, with some are entering operation into the lower levels of the crown. And then here at the throat center, we've completely departed the lower realms, even moved beyond the heart center, and we're at the upper levels of the throat center, entirely in the Christ and majority in the crown, in the lower levels of the crown center. And then when we move into cosmic consciousness, you can see we're entirely in the higher etheric realms of operation, being the crown center, the Christ, and the throat, with practically completely departed, very little operation in the heart center, but we're entirely operating in the higher realms. Did you want to add anything to that, Imaya?
No, no.
So I hope this gives some idea, and Nehemiah talked about it earlier, the true Kundalini awakening and true meditation. This is not something that can be easily achieved, but takes many, many lives to accomplish. There's a question here, following up with your discussion on Kundalini, Nehemiah Kundalini awakening, is when people are experiencing these types of Kundalini experiences, how can they gain control of the energy?
If someone is having Kundalini experiences, they have gained control of the energy. Remember, Kundalini is an energy brought down by the soul from the cosmos. The soul brings this energy down and down through Shushuna from the logos of that earth and from the cosmos. And what we're told, that actually the soul pulls the energy from the cosmos. Then the soul pull energy from the logos of that prospective planet and lodge it into the auric field and shield it through Shushuna and bring it down to the equilibrium state of that prospective planet, which ours is the root chakra, the Muladhara chakra. And then it go into this, what we call the Shiva state. And this Shiva state reveals Kundalini. It takes the awareness of the soul away, and it states in the ancient teaching, the whole becomes the not whole. And that's where it divides the energy. Now, what Kundalini does, when you gain control over Kundalini, you unite this energy together again, and you push this energy up through Shushuna. In order to do that, you must control energy. So all the energy in the body must be brought under control. And the only way you can do that is by controlling mind, because mind controls energy. I hope that answers your question.
A comment here. Thank you for your service. It's such a powerful project. Thank you. I live in Iran, and in my country, people charge for these information. Thank you for joining us. So are there any additional questions or comments? I believe we'll stop here. This concludes the 7 chakras of Sushumna diagram. As a reminder, next time we will be covering the transmission. I believe in the second half of the open discussion. We'll still have the regular open discussion. But in the second half, I would like to cover the transmission Where is Your Honor, given by Mars Sector 8. And you can get a copy of this transmission from the website shown on your screen at their site web store. It's included in Cosmic Voice Volume number 2 on page 77. And if you do get the ebook version, the page numbers may be different. I don't know. I have the physical book. But if you do get the physical book, it is page 77 or in the ebook somewhere around there. Any final questions or comments before we close out today's open discussion session? It was a good session, so thank you everyone for your attendance and for your questions and your comments. I do appreciate the engagement, as it is very encouraging, not just for me, but for us as we host and provide this material for you. I'll try to get back to a weekly schedule. I apologize for the delays and the breaks in broadcasting, but I'm not always able to come up and host a class every week as I was in the past. But certain issues in my life are being resolved, and so hopefully very soon we'll get back to a weekly schedule. Or even better, meeting in person. I'm looking forward to that as well. Questions? No? All right, so let us close out with reciting the New Lord's Prayer given by the Master Jesus through the mediumship of Dr. George King. Oh, where's my Zoom? Oh, here it is. All right. The New Lord's Prayer. O divine and wondrous Spirit, O everlasting Lord of hosts, send forth now through me thy great and lasting power. Allow me, Almighty God, the lasting privilege of radiating to all the world thy great love, so that those who suffer may be given the power and energy to rise above their weaknesses. Almighty God, in great humility do I ask you to send forth your power to give to me this great lasting privilege of being a channel, so that my suffering brothers may be helped and guided and healed and lifted into thy light, so that they who know not may look up and in doing so receive through their higher selves your divine counsel. Almighty God, this day have you granted me a divine privilege. I ask you now to give to me the strength so that never again will I turn from my inner vision of you. Oh, great peace, great peace, great peace. In praise of your greatness, O God, doth my soul sing. Grant it energy to sing on forever. Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind attendance and participation. Have a wonderful week, and we look forward to learning with you next time. Take care.